Reluctant Messenger Unleashed Nation, we want to welcome you to episode 25, our special bonus episode that we promised. We're going to discuss the tools from our consciousness awareness toolbox that we've gathered through these past 24 episodes of Unleashing the Reluctant Messenger. But here's another little bonus. We have so much to cover that we're bringing you 2 bonus episodes.
I like that, Donna. That's a bonus on top of a bonus.
I'm your host, Donna Rebido, and with me is author Candy Sanderson.
Welcome back, everyone. And just what a nice little surprise that is, having that second bonus episode. But, I can't help but laugh, Donna, because for us, that's really not surprising. Every time we get ready to release another episode, I want the audience to know that, Donna, you and I get together beforehand and we go over talking points. And when we do that, all the time, more stuff just bubbles to the surface. And we end up talking about things that we didn't plan on. But you know what? This is our guide's way of interjecting some nuggets here and there. It's what they think should be covered. So it wasn't necessarily on our list. But by this time, none of this surprises us.
That's so true, Candy, and our guides and angels also do that and did that during our recordings. A thought would drop in, or you might start having some channeled messages. And it's been a divinely inspired way of sharing information from Candy's messengers combined with my guides. It's been a great learning experience. Speaking of learning experience, it wouldn't feel right unless I said this. Pull out your homework. Let's begin. Okay. There's a couple of things we need to go over first and to help you understand this whole concept. And they're the basis of all the tools that we've gathered. And if you remember from one of our episodes, our brain need categories, very much like the examples I gave. When we attempt to repeat a series of random numbers, I said, Candy, can you repeat these numbers 1, 2000, 8000, 1, 5, 17, whatever. You only remember the primacy and recency numbers. That is the first and last numbers. That's what you usually try to remember. But when we put them in categories like multiples of 5, 5, 10, 15, 20, you're going to remember all of them. So our brains need categories, and categories help us to understand concepts. So we've provided this model that you see on the screen. It's our consciousness awareness toolbox model. Now I do have to interject one thing. Candy had done all the talking points for this episode. And when we started going over it, this model, the basic skeleton, popped in and we had to redo all the talking points. So I want you to know we put a lot of thought into this particular model. So I'm going to explain it. So if you look at the top, it's very much like psychologists use. We have thought leads to energy. Energy leads to action. But how we say it is thought, energy, and action. And a thought could be our intention. Any intention, for example, to meet our guides. We have our intention, and then we have our POE. We go out to the field of energy. We become the observer, we expand, and then we meet our guides. So keep that in mind whenever you're going to try to use the tools. Operational components. So these are basic things. 1, the emotional guidance system. And that's the quality control based on the type of fuel. And we're going to be explaining this all through the episodes. 2, energy recognition system, or GPS. And then we had to develop a category and so we decided on the tools to use their purpose. And so we have 3 things that we're going to talk about. The first is protection. You really need to be protected. So the tools are going to be the REBAL, the cage of light, crystalline grid, prayer, and intention. 2, movement. How are we going to be able to move when we go out to the 5D? You have a slider, a ladder of enlightenment, the Merkaba, a coiled timeline, and meditation. 3, an easy dashboard. So it's an instrument panel. And what's on the dashboard are the slider, the brain is radio tuner, coiled timeline, ladder of enlightenment, Merkaba, cage of light, crystalline grid, clouds of energy packets, crystals, that super soaker energy gun, and an easy button. So the protection, these tools help us during our travels in the 5D. The movement, we use these tools to expand our awareness or travel within the 5D. And the dashboard are tools to adjust and control those 5D experiences. And that's the model. And now we're going to break it down for you so that you really can understand that. So, Candy, can you help us understand some of the aspects of this model? For example, how about that emotional guidance system, the energy recognition system? How do they fit into this model?
Well, first of all, the formula is thought, energy, action. Now, I'm going to break down these three components. Donna, as a former professional athlete, I'm talking about you, not me. You know this more than anyone. To perform, in other words, to take action, the action in our formula, you have to have fuel in order to power your performance. So the day before hitting the basketball court, you eat, but you have choices. Do you pick healthy foods or that box of chocolate sitting on your bedside table, which I would do? The type of fuel you choose will affect the quality of your action. So let's plug this into our formula. That first component in the formula is thought. So we have a thought, wanting to perform well in basketball, or if we're talking about 5D, maybe wanting to meet our guides and angels. But whatever that thought is, it needs fuel. Before any action can occur, we need to fuel that energy. And that leads us to the second component of the equation, energy. How much energy we have depends on the fuel we use. Hopefully, we would choose healthy food choices, not burritos and candy to give us the energy. In the 5D, healthy fuel would be the energy associated with emotions like love and gratitude and joy, kindness, humor, compassion. And next, we have the action. The action would be you, Donna, on the basketball court. How many baskets do you make? How many rebounds? How many three-pointers? Or in the 5D, do we meet our guides and angels and have a meaningful conversation? This is pretty straightforward, but we have some innate systems that the messengers told me about, and these operate behind the scenes. So I like to think of these as operational components. They help this process to run, beginning with a thought and ending with action. So there's two major components. The first is the emotional guidance system. And then we have the energy recognition system. But that emotional guidance system, that is what will power our thoughts. It takes the fuel that we give it and it guides us toward an action. So it's in control of the quality of the action. That is our quality control. In this case, we're talking about an action, making 5 three-pointers during the game. Or maybe in the 5D, our desired action would be to bilocate, maybe to meet our guides, explore the cosmos. We have a choice with that emotional guidance system. What fuel do we use? In the 3D, is it the low octane fuel like candy instead of protein? In the 5D, do we choose the low octane fuel of greed, worry, envy? Donna, that's like mixing sugar with regular gasoline. It's not so good for the engine and it will not produce very good actions. Now, this is important. Now that we understand the quality control aspect of the emotional guidance system, now that we know it's based on the fuel that we choose to use, this empowers us. I would hope that we would use the high octane fuel of gratitude, love, appreciation, humor, joy, kindness. In the 3D, it's the veggies instead of the candy. But why is this important? Because that fuel will power and guide our actions. So once we know the power that the fuel has on our actions, this is when we become empowered because we understand that, Donna, we are the ones with the ingredients for the fuel. So realize the fuel we use will affect the quality of our action. Now, I'm not talking about the intensity. Our action can still be very intense with low octane fuel. It's triggering our, in that case, it's triggering our emotional guidance system to offer experiences that are not so pleasant. But the quality of our experiences, the quality is determined by this emotional guidance system. Again, it's our quality control mechanism. The end result in that formula, our action, can still be intense with low octane fuel. It's just triggering that emotional guidance to offer experiences that aren't so pleasant. But remember, we are the ones who fuel the experiences, our actions. So, do we want great experiences? Yep.
Yeah.
Or are we okay with poor ones? I would hope not. Now, I know I'm repeating myself, Donna, but this is just so key and so important because that energy recognition system is automatic. It runs in the background. It is constantly responding to what we choose to fuel it. So we have to be careful and mindful of what kind of fuel we choose to use.
You know, Kenny, that reminds me of something I want to share. We make the choice, but it's like choosing the red pill in the Matrix, if you remember that. You cannot not know this now. Now that you know it, you cannot not know this. You cannot go back. You've become empowered.
Oh, Donna, that is so true. I love that analogy. The other component I want to talk about is the energy recognition system. That's one of the operational components. Now, I like to think of the energy recognition system as our GPS, and it works hand in hand with our quality control system. So once the thought, which would be I want to perform well in basketball, or in the 5D, I want to connect with my guides, once it is fueled, where does it go? As a GPS, that energy recognition system, like the other one, working in the background, always on, it will gently guide us toward an action, playing basketball, meeting with guides. And this is key, it marks our path as we travel. Now, it's this GPS that brings us back to the 3D once we've traveled out in the cosmos or wherever we go. But what's so cool is it remembers our path as we go beyond time and space. So we can safely return home, but it's there since it's marked our path. It's there if we want to return, or in case we've accidentally fueled it with something not so good, maybe we want to avoid that specific place. But the energy recognition system drops a pin on the map and it allows us to return at will, just like a GPS or a virtual map. So if we've visited a loved one who's passed, or a guide, or an ascended master, it's that energy recognition system that remembers how we got there and it files it away for another time. We can return just by asking.
Yeah, I like that, Candy. It helps us understand these concepts. And even though it looks like those arrows, here's how we speak it. Here's how we say it. Energy follows thoughts, and actions follow energy. That's how we speak it to each other. We choose what fuel to use, and these operational components, these systems, remember, automatically operate, guiding us to the end result, the action. Now we're going to go look at the tools. There are so many in this book, but they mainly seem to fall into these three categories based on purpose. So we have three main functions, including that protection, movement, and what I call that instrument panel or dashboard. So for protection, remember, these, you can look at the page, you can print it out, come back to this. These tools protect us during our travels in the 5D, and they include what we call a REBAL, which is a resident energy balloon, cage of light, the crystalline grid, prayers, and intentions. We use these tools, we'll go over them more in detail, but we surround ourselves with protective energy to help keep us safe during our 5D travels, and that's really, really important. Just don't go out and pick up any hitchhikers, as my friend Nathan likes to say. Movement. We use these tools to expand our awareness or travel within the 5D, and they include the slider, ladder of enlightenment, Merkaba, coiled timeline, and meditation. These tools in the movement category help us move toward our goal, which is that action. It's what our intention or thought is. Connecting to guides, traveling through the cosmos, making the 3 pointers. The slider helps us slide our POE, our awareness, into the 5D. We also use the ladder of enlightenment to quickly access the 5D. Same way for the Merkaba. We visualize ourselves inside those, and they become vehicles of light so we can safely and quickly travel in the 5D. And we use the coiled timeline to visit the past or the future. Meditation and prayer, they help us achieve what we call point consciousness. Just think of it as stillness. Especially if you use sound-based frequencies like binaural beats, it allows our consciousness to expand into the unlimited field of energy. And then 3, our dashboard, our instrument panel. So we have that in front of us. And these tools adjust and control our 5D's experiences. And they also include things like slider, the brain is radio tuner, coiled timeline, ladder of enlightenment, Merkaba, cage of light, crystalline grid, one of my favorites, clouds of energy packets, crystals, super soaker energy, gun, and the easy button. You know, Candy, I love this metaphor. It's a dashboard because I'm a pilot and I need to have my instrument panel to fly my plane and guide me to my destination. And so I use it a lot. You'll note that some of the tools overlap in categories. You're probably wondering about that. Some are used for both movement and our specific instruments because they serve both purposes. And it took us a while to try to figure that out. We said we can't, we just have to put them in both. So the slider in our dashboard allows us to ramp up our awareness, but it's also a movement tool. Using our brain as radio tuners helps us to find the right frequency. We can use these internal tuner knobs to locate the larger bands of frequencies that we want to explore, like healing or manifestation. These have their own frequencies. So we're going to use our tuners to get to those frequencies. Now, we also use the tuners to return to places. I use the brain's radio tuner when I do remote viewing. For example, a week ago, I hit 3 out of 3 targets when tasked by my friend using the brain as a radio tuner. Most of the time it's not 100%, so you know.
That's great.
The coiled timeline is a movement tool to reach the past and future. It's also a specific instrument we use to get to those locations, and one that I also use in remote viewing. Candy, can you explain the others for us, please?
Yes. The ones remaining from the model are the ladder of enlightenment, the Merkaba, cage of light, crystalline grid, clouds of energy packets, crystals, my favorite super soaker energy gun, and a new one, the easy button. Now, the ladder of enlightenment and the Merkaba are both movement tools that carry us somewhere fast, but they become instruments when we visualize them. Then we can put them on our dashboard so that we have easy access at will. Once we superimpose our awareness, our POE, point of existence, on them, then, for example, we can zip up the ladder and then rapidly expand, or we can take off in the Merkaba, a vehicle of light. The cage of light and the crystalline grid are protection tools as well as instruments on our dashboard. We can initiate the cage of light by superimposing it over our POE. We can use the crystalline grid for communication, but we'll talk about that later. Now let's look at the clouds of energy packets and let's look at crystals. They're important parts of the dashboard. The instrument representing the cloud of energy packets is like a radar screen, and it shows us in real time where our intentions, our thoughts, that's in the formula, where they are. We will discuss that later. Let's take a look at crystals. We have crystals embedded in the dashboard, and all we need to do, Donna, is to touch them. Just lay your hand on them, and then we've accessed their properties. Quartz crystals, for example, will ramp up the energy of thought or intentions that we have. And we just embed whatever kind of gemstone we want in our dashboard. And depending on the type we use, we'll get different results. You know, some gemstones like hematite help keep us grounded. Others help us with healing. Now, we move to the Super Soaker water gun. That's something I use in healing. It allows me to cool down like inflamed nerve endings that are associated with pain. On my dashboard, I have like a holster for it on the side of the dashboard. So I always know where it is and I can access it quickly. Like, do you remember Quick Draw McGraw?
Quick draw.
And if you're too young to understand that, you'll have to look it up.
Okay.
But I loved Quick Draw McGraw. But the last tool on the, well, not the last tool, the next to the last tool on the dashboard is the EZ button. And I guess you can say it was the easiest way to symbolize the tool that represents something huge, changing perspectives. It allows us to experience events with a different point of view. The very last tool, though, is something that's called etc. We actually have that on the chart because tools are specific to the person using them. Donna has different tools than I have. And these tools grow and develop as we do. We may have the same tool, but we might use it differently. But you'll find that they evolve over time.
Yes, I don't have the quick draw gun on mine, but I know Candy does. So yeah, thanks, Candy. Let's talk about how we use them. So we'll start with that dot that I love, the POE. So now we're going to talk about their uses. What can you tell us about that, Candy?
Well, you're absolutely right, Donna. It starts with that dot that you love, the POE, the point of existence. That is our awareness. Most of us think of ourselves as our physical bodies. But why do we think that? That's because our POE, our awareness, is usually hanging out in our bodies, just resting comfortably, snoozing away. But as I had more and more conversations with the messengers, I realized, well, I didn't realize it, they told me that we could use this concept, the POE, as a tool. They showed me that the POE, first in its very constricted form, it's a dot. And Donna, I will always remember you stating in one of our episodes that when you visualize it as a dot, you can start using it. That's when it becomes real. And oh my gosh, that was so profound. So when we see our awareness as a dot, as the POE, we can actually start working with it. This is something I've added to the second edition of The Reluctant Messenger. In fact, it was one of the primary reasons I wrote the second edition. That one statement about visualizing the POE, oh my gosh, that was just too important not to update the book. But little did I know that we would find so many more gems of wisdom as we did each episode. And of course, I'm just the ultimate with note taking. So I had all these notes. And by the time we finished the last chapter, our last episode, I had 50 additional pages to add to the book. I didn't have a choice. This information was too valuable. I had to publish, I had to write. And when we're through with this edition, this second bonus edition, we're going to publish that second edition. And I'm saying we because it takes a village. But by the way, the second edition is all ready to go. I just received my proof copy of the printed edition in the mail. And if I can make myself hold off when that second bonus episode airs, I will hit publish on my 3D dashboard and it will be available on Amazon. But Donna, I have thought so much about your statement and what happens when we visualize our POE as a dot. And I think I understand why that's important. Let me try to explain. In one of my visions from the messengers about the POE, they depicted it as a small dot that usually stays tucked deep inside the body. But it becomes real, as you say, when we visualize it. Here's how I think that works, or here's how it works for me. The act of visualizing the POE means I have engaged the observer. The observer is an aspect of me that resides just beyond the 3D world. So activating the observer allows me to simultaneously witness three of me. I have my physical form, I have myself as the observer, and then I have the me that's in the vision or the meditation that I'm experiencing. So think about that. I am describing, which I didn't know it was until this was in one of our episodes, and you said, "Oh, Candy, do you know what you just did?" I am now describing bilocation in the 5D. Now, over time, I discovered that I could adjust the intensity of my visions by visualizing my POE, my awareness, on a slider. So, as a tool, that slider can shift my awareness away from the 3D and closer to the 5D. And the intensity of these experiences in the 5D, that changes on how we use the slider. The farther we slide it toward the non-physical, the more mystical our experiences become. But the quality of the experience, which is affecting the action in the formula, that's based on how we've fueled that quality control component of that emotional guidance system. If we use substandard fuel, low octane fuel of fear, anger, greed, envy, we're going to get pretty poor quality actions. So instead of meeting your angels, you might find yourself slogging around in some dark, slimy bog. So it's worth repeating. The fuel we use determines the quality of the action.
You know, Kenny, that's so true because if you're, something we've never talked about, but what my guides are telling me right now, we're adding something as we're going along. What a surprise. Is that don't forget, if you don't go anywhere, if you're in neutral, you have to check yourself to see if you have fear of even starting. So if you're not even going anywhere, that you could be in neutral, stuck in neutral, and you could be gunning the engine. So when I meet with my guides, I know I fueled my emotional guidance system with high octane emotions of joy and love. And I use that a lot, joy and love. I leave and I can then use my tools, the slider, the ladder of enlightenment, like a rocket ship to get there. Faster, better, more intense. And I can do this whenever I want to play in the 5D. So what I do, I envision my heart as a bright fluorescent green light. The more fuel I put in it, the more the green light glows. And I take that into the movement vehicles like the Merkaba, for example. So it's important to use high octane fuel because who wants an intense negative experience?
Right. And Donna, here's another thing I'm just getting to. You're talking about your heart as being this fluorescent green light. Remember when our your screen turned green?
Oh my God.
I I was talking. Oh no, this is crazy.
We're getting this. Boom,
Right.
boom.
So when you're in that episode, when your screen turned green, we were talking about the green and pink energy that I see that I now associate with the angelic realm. And you even mentioned, okay, everything's turning green, but the heart is that pink energy. So the pink energy from the heart meeting with the green is the angelic realm. So what you're doing without even realizing it, you're bringing that green light that you see and you're using the pink energy of the heart. So it's like, wow, pretty cool. So you've already set yourself up without even bringing in a lot of intentions to have a very positive experience. Now, this is why it's so important to realize the choices that we have. We are the ones who fuel the experiences, and you just set yourself up to have a very positive experience. Now, some things in this formula are automatic, like these operational components. So that quality control, the emotional guidance, is always there, and it's operating on whatever fuel we give it. So we have to be mindful of what fuel we use.
So, a quick reminder, everyone, it's like getting the red pill in the Matrix. And if you don't know that, you can watch the film or even go online and do a quick summary, a Cliff Notes version. But you cannot not know this now. So, you can't go back. So, you've become empowered.
That is so true, Donna. Knowledge is power. And now that we know the consequences of the type of fuel that we use, it's like wowzers. There are so many tools based on that dot. And when we put our dots on that slider, we're now using a tool to expand our awareness. So, going back to what I was sharing earlier, as my dot resting on that slider, as it moves toward the mystical encounter, like the vision I'm having, then both the observer and then my physical body, they actually begin to fade. And at the same time, I'm having more and more extensive and profound experiences in the vision. At this point, when I've slid all the way here, I am no longer watching, being the observer. I'm not watching myself in the visions anymore. I'm actively participating in the action in our formula. I'm there. I feel the grass beneath my feet. I hear birds chirping. I feel the wind in my face. And when that happens, Donna, it's real. It's more real than 3D. So the farther I slide that dot from the 3D, the more intense and real these 5D events become. The next thing you know, I'm in that action phase of the formula. I'm walking next to an ascended master. I'm zooming through the cosmos on the tail of a comet. It's wonderful.
And that's where the tools come into play, Candy. So let's look at that other operational component, the energy recognition system. So you're starting to see the difference. So this one this is the GPS, automatically marks where you are. So again, it means two things. But I want to add something. One, you can always find your way back home, so there's no fear about getting lost out there. That might, again, keep you in neutral, not getting anywhere. So check your fears. So you have the energy recognition system that's going to bring you back. You can't get lost. It also means you can return to the same 5D spot at a later time, which means practice is in there. In addition, you can use other tools for extra protection that we've talked about. You can add layers of protection during your 5D adventures. But because your awareness moves on the slider, you know it's a tool. It means you can control it. You are in control. So if the adventure gets too intense, you can slide it back down toward the 3D, and you're always connected to your physical body. So your observer function that Candy was talking about is that intermediary connecting your awareness to both your body in the 3D and you in the 5D. So let me give you an example of that. We were mentioned this in episode 17 about using the dot. It's like when I was playing softball. I was just a kid, but I was imagining the next game. And I didn't realize I was putting myself in the future. I mean, I was just sitting there going, I saw myself hitting singles. And so by doing that year, what was remarkable at the end of the year, I didn't realize this, but our coach gets us together. He said I had the highest batting average of the year. But using the dot as the POE, it all snapped back into place for me. I went, oh my gosh, that's what I was doing. So now that we understand this dot and how we can use it, let's talk about how it affects time. One of my favorite topics. When we understand this, it adds a tool to help us experience past lives or even future lives. So going back, why would we do that? Going back to revisit our past can help us negotiate our current lives. We maybe get better understanding of something. So Candy, what this means, get ready. Not only am I a spoon bender, but I'm a time bender. So, Kenny, let's talk about time.
Donna, I love that. In the book, chapter 3 is Father Time. The messenger showed me a series of black dots. Of course, that's our POEs, and they were superimposed on a straight line. And those dots moved from the beginning of the straight line to its other end, like do, 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 do. And that showed that time is a one way route from one chronological event to the other. Time marches forward in one direction only, forward. That made sense to me. That's how I viewed time back then. But then the messengers changed the design to show me how time really works.
Yep.
So that straight timeline stretched, it became much longer. Then the line began to wave up and down, and it created this gentle, repetitive sine wave. And then next, those waves became much stronger, higher, and then even more compact. So we went from time being a straight line to a gentle, curvy line. And now they're just like tall, squeezed together, and they're coiled like a compressed or closed accordion. Now, as the POE travels this timeline, we can see that that trip from point A to point B is longer. And the more curves there are, the more indirect the trip is between point A and point B. The key elements here are that the distance of the POE that it travels is related to the size of the waves and how compact they are in the timeline. So now we have a coiled timeline. But, and this is just as important, this is another concept that I had to wrap my brain around. Our interpretation of time is not that it's stretched and coiled, it's also related to the size of our POE. It depends on how expanded our awareness is. So, imagining time as a coiled timeline, instead of having my dot moving around, let's just put my dot in the middle of it. And now I expand my dot. And it's like, aha, I immediately understood the impact that expanded awareness had. As our POE enlarges, it changes from an individual, isolated particle to a field of energy. And when we overlay, so we're using a tool now, when we overlay this three-dimensional sphere on the POE, we see how it affects time. As the POE expands, there's more and more of that coiled timeline within it. It's no longer a dot moving on the line, it's enclosed much of that timeline within it. And what is that POE? It's our awareness. What's happened now is that POE has become a gateway beyond the present moment. As a dot, it was the present moment. Now we have access to the past and the future. Time is no longer linear, it has become fluid. So as awareness expands, time shifts. We expand and we begin to experience life beyond that 3D. And the more we expand, the greater and more mystical our experiences become. With expanded awareness, we can now receive messages from our angels and guides. But what's so cool about this, Donna, over time, I realized this correlation. As consciousness expands, the imagery that would come to me during the 5D, that became just as effective as physical action is in the normal waking state. This is key. And I didn't really understand it when the messengers told me, but now I get it. When our POEs stretch into a field of energy, the imagery within that field works like physical objects do in 3D. And why is that important? Donna, it just explains why all of these tools that we've collected are effective. They're real.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Donna, that is
Mm-hmm.
especially true with our instrument panel, our dashboard. It's real, it works. But now we have another variable here that we can control. It's our expanded awareness. And how do we expand our POE? How do we stretch our consciousness? Something the messengers have told me, heart energy. We use heart energy, and this goes back to what you just talked about, visualizing a green light in your heart. We use that very positive, which is our high octane fuel that we mentioned. Our emotional guidance, the quality control system, will take our heart energy and ramp up the quality of the experience. Donna, all of these tools revolve around that dot that you love, the POE. And I've learned so much from the messengers about the POE, but it was only after our unleashed conversations that I realized how powerful the POE is in consciousness exploration. We can enlarge our POEs by fueling them with high octane energy from the heart. And now, you know what? I'm just now getting this. Here's another one of those. The messengers have always said that the heart is a portal, but now I understand exactly what they mean. So, the how of the heart being a portal, it's the heart that fuels the experiences that guides us with the divine. So, automatically using that heart brings us into that high octane fuel. When we expand using that heart, then that's when we open ourselves. It is a portal to the field energy, and that's where we can connect and interact with other field energies. We move from that isolated particle, from that dot, to this beautiful, expansive field form. Now, why is that important? First of all, we realize, remember what Bob Monroe used to say, we are more than our physical bodies. But when we embrace that field energy, we begin to experience life beyond the dot, beyond the five senses. As an isolated dot in the body, we have limited resources. But that means, among other things, that if we stay as a dot, we experience time as linear, point A to point B. But when we begin to embrace and step into that field experience, Donna, we've just jumped on that coiled timeline. And when we do, we've just used that coiled timeline as a tool, and we use it to direct our POEs. So that coiled timeline is a tool of movement. We can go forward and backward in time, but we can also put that coiled timeline on our dashboard and pull it out whenever we need to. For example, if I want to time travel,
Mm-hmm.
I'd look at my dashboard, and my coiled timeline looks like a slinky. So I pull it off the dashboard and I can stretch it or let it stay compressed. But then I take that coiled timeline, that slinky, I superimpose it over my POE, and then I can move whatever direction I want to experience, whether it's the past or it's the future. But once we've expanded, we're in that field of energy. And when we've done that, we've actually shifted the margins of present time, and our perceptions include so much more than what our physical senses can measure.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah,
People need to go back and revisit that. But you're talking about perceptions. So it's interesting to me about that. And I don't know if you know this, but Paul H. Smith, he's a retired Army major who worked for years in the government's remote viewing program. He's also my teacher and he's on my podcast. But he now calls remote viewing remote perception. Makes much more sense, doesn't it? It fits well into this model, what we learned from the messengers. So now I call myself, when I do remote viewing, I now say I do remote perception. But how I do it a couple of different ways. I actually start with my brain to tune into the radio frequency for remote perception. So I dial that in. Once I hit that, and I know that because of practice, I use the coiled timeline that you just described to actually do that. And I use it to focus on the target I was given for the task. For example, I'm remote viewing this weekend. So I took my POE, I expanded it, I used the coiled timeline, and I can see myself bending time. I can go forward. It's almost like I need feedback. I need to know what it is that I'm remote viewing. And this is a picture, so the picture's going to be revealed to me in the future. So I bend time, I go in, I look at the picture that I'm going to be shown in the future, and I draw that now in the 3D. So I use it to focus on the target I was given for the task.
Donna, I love that remote perception. That's a great idea. It makes sense.
Well, Candy, this looks like a good enough place as any for us to end the day. We'll take up where we leave off and when we start the second half of the bonus episode. So stay tuned for the next episode when we finish our discussions about the tools from the Consciousness Awareness Toolbox. We want to thank everyone for tuning in, and if you haven't done your homework, you've earned a free pass because we've done it for you. But bring that homework to the next episode.
Thanks, Donna. I loved this episode, and using that model really helps explain the tools and how we use them. And that was all your idea. So I've got to thank you for that. But until next time, guys, remember all those tools that we've gone over today. Put them to use. Feel free to share our episode, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Only one more episode. So until then, bye. We love you guys.